What if the future of African industry begins with something as ordinary as a bottle of water? Imagine a customer walking into a small shop in Burkina Faso and reaching for a drink made inside the country. To him, it may simply be something to quench his thirst. But behind that bottle can stand factory workers, production lines, quality inspectors, truck drivers, distributors, plastic preforms, bottle caps, and families whose income depends on those jobs. That is why the growing debate over consuming locally made products in Burkina Faso deserves a closer look. Captain Ibrahim Traoré did not invent West Africa's buy local movement, but his government has increasingly connected local consumption with a much larger ambition: industrial development, jobs, economic resilience, and greater control over what Burkina Faso produces for its own people. And that brings us to TuuM Industry in Bobo-Dioulasso. According to the company, its industrial operation directly employs more than 1,000 people and indirectly supports hundreds more. It produces mineral water, soft drinks, energy drinks, fruit beverages, milk products, and coffee. More importantly, the company says it has moved beyond simply filling bottles. It also produces bottle preforms and caps for its own operations, bringing additional stages of production onto Burkinabe soil. That does not make Burkina Faso economically independent, and it certainly does not mean Traoré created those jobs. TuuM existed before many of the policies we are discussing, but the factory gives us something valuable: a real place where we can test the bigger idea. Can buying locally actually support industrial jobs? How much of the production chain can Burkina Faso realistically bring home? Can local manufacturers compete on price and quality? And could this approach offer lessons for other African nations? If you want to follow Africa through what is actually being built, produced, and tested on the ground, follow this channel. Because behind this ordinary bottle lies a much bigger question: who produces what Africans consume? And who ultimately benefits from that production? The idea of buying local did not begin with Ibrahim Traoré and understanding that history matters. Across the West African Economic and Monetary Union, October has been promoted as a month for local consumption since 2019. The initiative was designed to encourage people across the region to look more seriously at products made closer to home. Burkina Faso was therefore already part of this movement before Traoré came to power. What changed under his leadership was the political weight attached to the idea. In October 2024, Burkina Faso officially launched another edition of the local consumption campaign in Ouagadougou. Traoré's message connected the choices people make in shops and markets with industrial development, decent employment, and the ability of the economy to withstand external shocks. That distinction is important. Buying a Burkinabe product is not automatically an act of economic transformation. If most of its ingredients, packaging, machinery, and other inputs come from abroad, much of the production chain can still remain outside the country. But the equation begins to change when more stages are performed locally. Consider what happens when demand for a domestically manufactured product becomes strong enough to support a factory. That factory needs workers. It needs technicians. It needs transportation and distribution. It may eventually need local suppliers. Those workers receive income, and some of that money returns to shops, farms, services, and other businesses. This is the economic logic behind the political message. Traoré has increasingly framed local consumption not simply as a matter of national pride, but as part of what his government calls endogenous development, meaning development built more strongly upon domestic capabilities. Yet, there is an obvious test. A government can ask citizens to buy local products, but it cannot manufacture consumer loyalty through speeches. Factories must still deliver products people can afford, trust, and choose repeatedly. So the real question is not whether Burkinabe consumers can be persuaded to buy local ones. It is whether Burkina Faso can build industries capable of earning that choice again and again. And in Bobo-Dioulasso, TuuM Industry offers a revealing place to examine that question. Now, we can step inside the factory. TuuM Industry operates in Bobo-Dioulasso, one of Burkina Faso's major commercial and industrial centers. According to the company, what stands there today is not a small workshop serving a neighborhood market. It is an industrial operation producing a broad range of everyday consumer goods. The company's portfolio includes soft drinks, energy drinks, fruit beverages, mineral water, powdered milk products, and 3-in-1 coffee. These are not luxury goods reserved for a small group of consumers. They belong to the category of products ordinary people can encounter in shops, markets, workplaces, and homes. And the scale claimed by the company is significant. TuuM says it directly employs more than 1,000 people, while another 250 people benefit from indirect employment connected with its activities. Those figures come from the company itself and should be understood as company-reported numbers rather than independently verified employment statistics. Its production figures are equally ambitious. According to TuuM, 3 beverage production lines have nominal capacities of 22,000, 35,000, and 45,000 bottles per hour. The company also reports operating 4 food beverage lines along with facilities for powdered milk products and coffee. But numbers alone do not tell us whether a factory strengthens an economy. A country can have impressive machinery while still importing much of what those machines require. A production line can fill thousands of bottles while important portions of the value chain remain somewhere else. That is why the most interesting part of TuuM's story is not simply how quickly bottles move through its production lines. It is what the company says happens before those bottles are filled. TuuM says it has invested in producing bottle preforms and caps for its own operations. That means the factory is attempting to bring additional stages of the production process under its own control inside Burkina Faso. And suddenly, something as small as a bottle cap becomes part of a much larger economic story. Now consider the bottle cap. It is small, inexpensive, and easy to overlook. Yet without it, a beverage factory cannot deliver a finished bottle to the customer. The same is true of the plastic preform that eventually becomes the bottle itself. This is where the idea of local production becomes more interesting. A beverage does not appear simply because a factory mixes ingredients and fills containers. The production chain includes packaging materials, caps, bottles, quality control, machinery, transportation, storage, and distribution. If critical parts of that chain must always arrive from abroad, the factory remains exposed to delays, higher transportation costs, currency pressures, and disruptions far beyond its control. According to TuuM, the company produces its own bottle preforms and caps. It also says it operates its own carbon dioxide production unit for its industrial needs. That does not mean TuuM is independent from foreign suppliers. Its machinery may come from abroad, some raw materials may still be imported, replacement parts, industrial inputs, and specialized technology can also connect the factory to international supply chains. The available information does not establish that every stage of production is Burkinabe. But complete self-sufficiency is not the only measure that matters. Suppose yesterday a factory imported the finished bottle, the cap, and other packaging components. If tomorrow it can manufacture the preform and cap locally, then additional production has moved onto Burkinabe soil. That can mean additional technical knowledge, additional industrial activity, and greater control over parts of the supply chain. This is what partial localization looks like. Economic sovereignty does not require Burkina Faso to manufacture every machine, every ingredient, and every component behind closed borders. A stronger economy can still trade with the world. The question is whether it has enough productive capacity to make choices rather than remain dependent on one external source for every critical step. Seen from that perspective, the humble bottle cap tells us something important. Industrial sovereignty is rarely built in one dramatic moment. It can begin one production stage at a time. But production only matters if somebody buys what the factory makes. This is where the connection between local consumption and employment becomes clearer. It is tempting to reduce the idea to a simple slogan: buy one Burkinabe product and create one Burkinabe job. The real economic relationship is more complicated. Consumer demand creates sales. Consistent sales allow factories to keep production lines operating. Production requires workers, technicians, maintenance teams, quality inspectors, warehouse staff, drivers, and distributors. If local suppliers become part of that chain, the economic effect can spread further. TuuM offers a useful example. According to the company, more than 1,000 people work directly in its operation, with more than 250 additional indirect jobs associated with its activities. Again, those are company-reported figures. And Ibrahim Traoré did not create those jobs. TuuM existed before the current government's campaign became central to this political discussion. But the factory helps explain why Traoré increasingly links local consumption with employment. And TuuM is not the only industrial project worth watching. Burkina Faso has been promoting additional domestic processing capacity. In 2025, the Moulin Double Star Flour Mill was inaugurated near Ouagadougou, with government information describing an investment of roughly 15 billion CFA francs, equivalent to about $27 million, and a planned flour production capacity of around 220 tons per day. Other projects have focused on processing tomatoes, oilseeds, corn, and additional agricultural products. The pattern matters more than any single ribbon-cutting ceremony. A new factory is not automatically a successful factory. The real test comes years later. Is it still producing? Are workers still employed? Can its products compete? Is productivity improving? That is the difference between industrial announcements and industrial development. TuuM therefore should not be presented as proof that Burkina Faso has solved its economic challenges. It is better understood as one piece of a larger experiment. And standing behind that experiment is a political question Ibrahim Traoré has pushed increasingly into public view. How much of what Burkinabe people consume every day can eventually be produced by Burkinabe industry? This brings us to Ibrahim Traoré himself. His role in this story is important, but it should not be exaggerated. He did not create TuuM Industry, and Burkina Faso's campaign to encourage local consumption existed before he came to power. His influence lies somewhere else. He has elevated local production and consumption into a larger political argument about economic sovereignty. Under Traoré, the message has increasingly been that industrialization can begin with the ordinary products people use every day. That idea is simple but significant. Instead of imagining industrial development only through enormous mines or sophisticated technology, a country can also begin with food, beverages, clothing, construction materials, and agricultural processing. These are products for which a domestic market already exists. Traoré's government has connected this approach with what it calls endogenous development, meaning that Burkina Faso should build more productive capacity from within rather than remain excessively dependent on finished goods from outside. But a president cannot industrialize a country by himself. Governments can establish priorities, invest in infrastructure, support training, encourage domestic processing, and create conditions for investment. Businesses must still raise capital and operate factories. Workers must develop the necessary skills. And consumers ultimately decide whether products succeed in the marketplace. That distinction protects the story from becoming a celebration of one political leader. Traoré's real influence is therefore better understood as setting direction. His argument asked Burkinabe citizens to look differently at what they consume. Behind imported goods are foreign production chains. Behind locally manufactured goods may be opportunities to build domestic production chains of their own. But political ambition is only the beginning. If a Burkinabe factory produces an expensive product that people cannot afford, the strategy fails. If quality is unreliable, consumers will look elsewhere. If companies survive only because competition is permanently suppressed, industrial strength may remain an illusion. So Traoré can encourage Burkina Faso to produce more. The harder question is whether Burkinabe industry can earn the confidence of its own consumers. And that brings us to the next test: quality and price. Quality may be where the entire buy local strategy succeeds or fails. A customer may choose a Burkinabe product once because he wants to support his country, but patriotism cannot guarantee a second purchase. If the drink tastes inconsistent, if the packaging fails, or if the price is simply too high, loyalty will eventually meet economic reality. TuuM appears to understand this challenge. The company says it operates an internal laboratory, uses modern testing equipment, and regularly checks its products as part of its quality management system. These are company claims, and not every detail has been independently verified. Still, the principle behind them matters. Local production must compete on quality. It must also compete on price. Burkina Faso has faced serious pressure on household purchasing power. Food prices have risen sharply during difficult periods, while millions of citizens continue to live with limited incomes. For those families, choosing a product is not an abstract debate about economic sovereignty. It is a calculation made with money that must also pay for food, transportation, medicine, and other necessities. And locally made does not automatically mean cheaper. A Burkinabe manufacturer may still depend on imported machinery, replacement parts, industrial materials, or energy. Transportation costs and limited production scale can also affect the final price. This creates a difficult but healthy test for the Made in Burkina ambition. Consumers should not be expected to accept permanently higher prices or lower standards simply because a national flag can be placed behind a product. The stronger goal is to build companies capable of winning customers through quality, affordability, and reliability while keeping more productive activity inside the country. Patriotism may convince a customer to try a local product once. Quality determines whether that customer returns, and price determines whether many families can return at all. That is why buy local cannot stand alone. It must be accompanied by build local, improve local, and compete local. If Burkina Faso can achieve that combination, local consumption becomes more than a slogan. But if it cannot, even the strongest political message will eventually collide with the reality of the marketplace. Now, we come to one of the most contested parts of Burkina Faso's economic direction: how the outside world views it. It would be misleading to say that the West simply opposes Burkina Faso producing its own goods. The criticism documented by international institutions is more specific. Organizations such as the International Monetary Fund have raised questions about whether expanding state involvement could eventually crowd out private investment. They have also emphasized public investment efficiency, transparency, productivity, and the need for a stronger private sector. These concerns deserve to be taken seriously. Building factories does not automatically create a strong industrial economy. A government can announce projects and invest large sums, but the real test comes later. Are those factories productive? Do they remain open? Do they create sustainable employment? Can private companies compete without permanent protection? At the same time, the evidence does not support a simple story in which Western institutions declare Traoré's economic approach a failure. The International Monetary Fund has also acknowledged Burkina Faso's economic resilience under extremely difficult security and humanitarian conditions. The World Bank has reported continued economic growth while emphasizing that growth must eventually translate into productive jobs and broader opportunity. So the real disagreement is more interesting than a confrontation between Traoré and the West. It is a debate over how economic sovereignty should actually work. Traoré's direction emphasizes domestic production, processing, local consumption, and greater national control. International economic institutions place greater emphasis on efficiency, private investment, competition, and long-term financial sustainability. These ideas do not have to be mutually exclusive. Burkina Faso could expand local production while maintaining competition. It could support strategic industries without protecting inefficient companies forever. It could reduce certain dependencies while continuing to trade internationally. That is why TuuM matters as a test rather than a symbol of victory. If factories like this can maintain quality, control costs, create lasting jobs, and survive in competitive markets, the argument for local industrial capacity becomes stronger. In the end, speeches will not settle this debate. Factories that continue producing year after year will. The lesson from Burkina Faso becomes even more important when we look beyond its borders. Economic sovereignty does not mean every African country must manufacture everything it consumes. For a landlocked country such as Burkina Faso, that would be neither practical nor necessary. A stronger vision is regional. Burkina Faso might develop competitive industries in certain products, while Mali specializes in others. Niger can contribute its own resources and industries, while neighboring economies such as Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire provide different materials, services, technologies, and markets. The objective is not to eliminate trade. It is to increase the amount of value created within Africa before a finished product reaches an African consumer. That means moving beyond exporting raw materials whenever economically practical and building more capacity for processing, packaging, manufacturing, branding, transportation, and distribution. For West Africa and the Sahel, this could gradually create deeper regional supply chains and larger markets for African manufacturers. But other African nations should not simply copy Burkina Faso. Each country has different resources, infrastructure, skills, energy cost, and consumer markets. The lesson is to identify products people already consume, determine which stages can realistically be produced locally, and then build competitive businesses around those opportunities. Buy African must therefore be accompanied by Build African, and neither should mean rejecting the rest of the world. Africa will continue importing technology, machinery, knowledge, and products that make economic sense. It will continue exporting and trading with global partners. The goal is a stronger negotiating position. Africa does not need to stop trading with the world. It needs greater productive capacity so that it can trade with the world from strength. So we return to where this story began. An ordinary bottle in the hands of a Burkinabe consumer. By now, that bottle looks different. Behind it may stand workers, technicians, production lines, quality controls, packaging, transportation, distribution, and a company trying to capture more stages of production inside Burkina Faso. According to TuuM, more than 1,000 direct jobs are connected to its operation. That claim deserves continued independent scrutiny, but the larger economic question remains valid. Ibrahim Traoré did not invent the original campaign to consume local products. He did not create TuuM. Yet, Ibrahim Traoré has helped turn a familiar question about what people buy into a larger debate about what Burkina Faso can produce for itself. That ambition should not be measured by speeches or ribbon-cutting ceremonies. It should be measured years from now. Are the factories still operating? Are the jobs still there? Has productivity improved? Can local products compete on quality and price? Are more stages of production taking place inside Africa? Those questions matter far beyond Burkina Faso. Across Mali and Niger, leaders such as Assimi Goïta and Abdourahmane Tiani are also governing amid debates about sovereignty and the future of the Sahel. Relations with France have changed dramatically, while West Africa continues searching for new economic arrangements. The African Union and other regional institutions will also face a fundamental question. How can political aspirations for sovereignty be supported by real productive capacity? This is where Africa News should look beyond declarations and examine what is happening inside farms, factories, warehouses, and markets. The lesson is not that every African nation should copy Burkina Faso, nor is it that Africa should isolate itself from global trade. The stronger lesson is simpler. Produce more where it makes economic sense. Process more of what the continent already produces. Build competitive companies. Train workers. Protect quality. Expand regional trade. And measure success by lasting jobs and productive industries. A bottle of water cannot transform a continent, but thousands of products, millions of purchasing decisions, and stronger African production chains could gradually change where value is created. So what product does your country import today that you believe could realistically be produced competitively at home? Share your answer and follow the channel as we continue examining the industries, decisions, and economic changes shaping Africa's future. We sincerely appreciate your time and support. Every video on this channel is carefully researched, thoughtfully written, and meticulously edited by our dedicated team. We don't rely on automated production or shortcuts to create our content. Every story, every visual, and every detail is crafted with genuine care, passion, and a commitment to bringing you meaningful, high-quality videos.